Somehow, after all of this, the markets still aren't taking Justin Jefferson seriously. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to my hashtag everydayers. Y'all have been so active lately. Been hearing a lot from you. I love it. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. If you're new here, hello and welcome. My name is Luke. I'll be your host today. You can find the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts, by the way. If you just search out Locked On Vikings, anywhere you listen to shows, including YouTube or even Amazon Fire and Roku, where you can download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. You can also listen on the SiriusXM app, where you can also get live broadcasts of any Vikings game, including the upcoming preseason game. And with the upcoming preseason game, it means it's time to talk a little bit about some Grambles. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So we're doing a Grambling episode today. Not a FanDuel sponsored episode today, but we're gonna do this. This is something that I like to try to do every year. I kind of talk about the preseason bets, right? This is a great time if you are looking for that to, get a futures bet, something to root for all season long, an over-under on someone's yards or wins or whatever. This is a fun time to do it. And what it really gives us, though, is a sense for what the nation expects. Because here's the thing about this. When I worked the Super Bowl, I did a radio row at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, the one in LA, the Rams-Bengals one. I got to talk to somebody who helped an odds maker who could help me understand how these odds are made. And it's not like there's this cabal of cigar smoking experts sitting in a room going, I think 7.5 wins is the right number for the Vikings. That's not how it works. It's all based on market. There is call it a committee. There's a brain trust of sorts that gives you the initial line. And I think where Vegas is the most vulnerable is right when the lines drop. And then that's when the sharps hit it really hard. Right. And once the sharps hit it really hard, the line will adjust for that. But essentially the line adjusts to what people are hitting so that no matter which result you get, the books are only going to ever lose so much money. And it's fairly rare to see one where a ton of money is on one side and not on the other side without the line moving to compensate for that. So what that means is that this can actually be a decent proxy for what is public opinion about the Vikings. This is a Vikings podcast. You're all Vikings fans, or most of you are Vikings fans. A weird amount of you aren't Vikings fans. I will take that. Hello, I love you. Welcome in to listening to Locked On Vikings. But most of you are Vikings fans, so we could get a little echo chambery sometimes, right? We could be a little overly Vikings focused sometimes. And so it's nice to get that national perspective, that sort of objective idea. This is what the people really think of the Vikings. And what always astounds me is when you type in Justin Jefferson on these, what you get is unbelievable. Every year, his over-under for receiving yards is under 1,400. Now, I don't know if anyone's is over 1,400. I don't know if anyone's has ever been over 1,400. But the other thing about the number 1,400 is that outside of last year where he didn't play all the games and he still got 1,000, 1,400 is the worst full year that Justin Jefferson has had. That was his rookie year. That was his worst year by yards per game, I guess is a way to put it. And while you can never really plan for a hamstring injury taking you out for 8 games, 1,300 and a half. That's the FanDuel number. 1,300 and a half for Justin Jefferson receiving yards. Every time I do a FanDuel read, I'm that's insane to me. The only feasible way that he does not hit that number is an injury. And that applies to every single player prop that you will ever find, right? Naturally. So if you're going to pick one, that just feels like an absolute slam dunk to hit over under 1,300 and a half yards. As I look at FanDuel right now, it's at minus 112 too. So they're treating that as fairly even though I kind of feel like a lot of people are going to be slamming that over. It's just that, you kind of have to play at least most of the season to get that. For him, he's got to probably play like 11 games. So if you think he's not going to miss more than, 5 games, 6 games, then you're probably getting there. And so then it brings up the question, like, why is it always so low with him? Is it just Minnesota bias? Do people just not really understand the Vikings? Well, with this, there is, I think, a limit to just how high an over-under will go. Every year, there's going to be, as, passing increases every year too, right? Like, every year, there's somebody's going to get 1,800. And I think the strategy that they are employing is to kind of temper with everybody and accept that you're going to be wrong on one or two of these, but hopefully on the whole you make money, right? So I wouldn't go betting every one of these overs, right? But it is just so striking to me that the only two outcomes that you lose here are Justin Jefferson just gets hurt, which you're kind of agreeing to gamble on that the second you open the receiving props page, or Justin Jefferson has the worst year of his life. That just doesn't seem very possible, especially looking at camp. There's a clip from camp. Spare a thought for Byron Murphy, he's fine. He's not injured. He just has to go against Justin Jefferson every day. What a nightmare. He's like this clip of him in just absolute perfect coverage, and Jefferson just like boxes him out. Perfect ball on the back shoulder from Sam Darnold, catches it anyways with the guy draped all over. Like, Byron Murphy is doing everything a corner possibly can do here, and he still just like falls off him, and Jefferson takes the ball and like screams on it. It's like, man, yeah, it's good for him. Like, iron sharpens iron and all that, but it's like, give this poor guy a break. But I haven't talked much about Jefferson in camp. We'll do a little bit of a camp update later, by the way. As they're back, they're in full pads and everything like that. JJ McCarthy had a bit of a down day. We'll talk about it. We'll talk our way through it. But as like, we haven't heard a lot about Justin Jefferson in camp because it's just not really remarkable anymore to say Justin Jefferson, ran an insane go route and got a big long catch, because that's just all he ever does. We're repeating ourselves so much, but rest assured, it's happening. Justin Jefferson is still very much the best receiver on that field, even though you've probably heard more about Jordan Addison and Jalen Naylor. All three of those guys absolutely humming right now. Making the secondary look bad, although the secondary had a much better day on Thursday. So like, part of that is that there's just like a limit to what they'll do. And a guy like Justin Jefferson, who is so frequently good for yards, I guess the only other like explanation you could think of is maybe they don't think there will be as much passing yards to go around because of the quarterback situation. But I don't really buy that in a Kevin O'Connell offense. I still think he's going to throw the ball like 40 times in a row. Yeah, you're going to have some like interceptions and stuff, but you're also going to maybe be trailing in a lot of games because of that, which is going to up the passing volume as well. So from like a fantasy football, gambling perspective, Justin Jefferson over 1,300.5 yards, by far and away my favorite bet for the Vikings preseason. There's also, if you want to get a little spicier, he's plus 800 for the receiving leader. I believe that's third. And I kid you not, as I am recording this, it changed to plus 750. He's now tied for second with CeeDee Lamb. That was kind of fun to watch there. Tyreek Hill is the favorite at plus 600 for most regular season receiving yards. Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb tied for second at plus 750. So like, because you're betting against the field, all of these are going to be like, the best you get is 6-1, 7-1, right? Like, so that does tell me that the sports books are correctly identifying Justin Jefferson as a top three, I guess, if you want to count CeeDee Lamb, receiver in the league. And if you want to debate about Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson, you can go for it. I'm not really interested in that debate, like whatever. As long as he's up in that, like as long as you're acknowledging him as the class of the league, that is like, I'm good with that. I hate those like pick the winner bets because it's always just so much easier to bet the field. So they're definitely not my favorite value play, but that's, I think, properly valued for what it is. But it's definitely not something that I would personally put any money on. And then you have a lot of other gambles on the Vikings. I kind of wanted to go over everything that FanDuel has on their page right now. That is like specifically, that's Viking specific. I don't have time to get through everything. There's a bajillion things on there, but I did want to go over some of those gambles, and then we'll end the day off with a little bit of a camp powwow about the processes of learning. That'll be next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn is a great place to find whatever it is you are hiring for. If you are in charge of hiring for your small business or whatever it is, chances are that's not your sole responsibility. You've got a whole bunch of other things you got to worry about, and hiring is just another thing added on your plate, and LinkedIn understands that you got a lot going on. So they're going to help you out with tools that can help you write a good prompt, that can help you narrow down from their millions of possible candidates. And hey, 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit any other job board. So there's a huge portion of the job pool that you're just missing out on if you aren't going on LinkedIn. So go to LinkedIn Jobs, go to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL, and you can post your job for free there. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, if you are looking for some fantasy advice, because your draft's coming up, go to Locked On Fantasy Football. They will have you hooked up all season long, so they can help you out with your waiver claims, your start sits, everything you need all season long. Go check them out. Vinny Iyer over there has been doing this forever. Next up, some other non-Justin Jefferson bets. It's just so crazy that Justin Jefferson's amount is always so that low, and they always lose money on. It's crazy. Like last year was the first year that the under ever hit on a Justin Jefferson receiving prop, and that's because he got hurt. And the lessons remain unlearned, and it just feels like such an opportunity. But elsewhere, moving on, something else. The Vikings are plus 1,000 to win the North. That is a distant fourth place. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for it to be that distant. I think the Vikings and Bears are in very similar spots rebuild-wise, right? They both have they're in year 3 of their GMs, year 3 of their head coach. The roster is built mostly to now. It's no longer the guys that they've inherited, with maybe a couple of key Harrison Smith style exceptions. But for the most part, I think there's like single digit players left from the old regime on both rosters. And they're both kind of like, okay, rookie year quarterback with a roster that basically should be ready to go. Let's see what happens. But because Caleb Williams is so much better PR than JJ McCarthy, right? And he's the number 1 overall pick versus a 10 overall pick. I get it, right? Better draft stock. But for the difference to be that drastic is kind of crazy to me. The Bears are plus 330 to win the entire NFC North. Like putting the Lions and Packers up there, I get it. The Lions and Packers are built as this. They made the playoffs last year. They basically are running it back, if not improving. I get it. Like everyone's going to be bullish on them. But for the Bears to be like right there with them is incongruous with other stuff on FanDuel. If you look at the Chicago Bears win total, it's 8.5 versus the Vikings 2.5. So if the difference is just in one game, and I know that gets super compressed because you're not going to have any teams under 2.5 wins, right? Like everything kind of gravitates toward the middle for the same reasons we talked about with the Justin Jefferson thing. It's just going to be, if you make like a middling guess, you're just going to be closer every time, just like by the nature of number lines. But it's for the two teams to be like super close to each other like that. Like if you look at a team like the Panthers, they're 5.5, right? Like that, to see the Panthers and the Bears super different, that makes sense to me. There's a 3-game difference in their win total, but a 1-game difference in their win total and a 670 point difference in their division odds is kind of crazy to me. And what it tells me is I think that the market doesn't quite know what to do with the Vikings. So the odds makers at FanDuel just kind of threw it at 7.5. Is maybe a little below average. Nobody's taking the Vikings to win that division. Some people are so bullish on this Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze thing, and they're just like super, super excited about these rookies, forgetting that they're rookies, that they're hitting it. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to me. For whatever it's worth, I am not touching this division odds thing with a 10-foot pole. If I would take anything, I'd take Lions or Packers, but I don't want to try to make that decision with money on the line. So the Vikings over right now is at 7.5 wins. And by the way, people are slamming the under. People definitely don't believe in it to the point that it is at minus 156 at this point. So if you watch spreads when at places like FanDuel, and they'll move over the course of the week, right? A team will open up right now. For example, the Vikings are -1.5 at the Giants. So if you think the Vikings can win by 2 or more points, you can take that. Over the course of the week leading up, that'll probably move around a little bit as we find out who's starting and stuff, and we find out, hype and all that. But usually the actual price of those odds will shift around a little bit first. If it's -110 either way, it'll be, -120. It'll be +120 one way. But they'll basically never let it get past minus or +120 before they just move the line. And that's going to be the way that they handle spreads. With over-under totals, they're letting it go a lot crazier. So the Vikings are -156 to go under 7.5. That means people are slamming 7.5, and FanDuel doesn't want to give out that much of a payout if it hits, right? And that means people are not hitting over 7.5. So if you think over 7.5 will happen, that is, as I'm looking at it, at +134. So well over 2 times your money back if that actually hits, if the Vikings can win 8 games, if you think that they can win 8 games this year. Personally, I do think people are right to hit the under. I think, so what it implies, under 5.5, you get like alt win totals on FanDuel as well. And you can even do exact win totals with this. If you think like they will win exactly 6 games, you can take that at +600. So again, the books don't really know what to do with the Vikings. These exact win totals, they're all, because you're betting against the field, right? They're all +600, +650, that kind of thing. 5, 6, and 7 wins are all exactly +600. And that's the lowest that it gets. If you want 8 wins exactly, it's +650. If you want 4 wins exactly, it's +700. So 5, 6, and 7 wins. It essentially is telling you, we think they're going to be somewhere in the 5, 6, 7 range, but we have no idea where they're going to be within that range. It's like a really big confidence interval because they don't really know what to make of the JJ McCarthy Vikings. If you think they're wrong about that and you want to take over 5.5 at +156, you can do that. If you want to take under 5.5, it's at +172. So if you really want to doom on the Vikings and say, they're going to win 3 games or whatever, that's +172 if you want to get super aggressive about it. But they won't let you bet over under 6.5. That one's not on there because they don't know where you're going to land in that range, and they don't have really a lot of confidence in where the market is at on them. Some other interesting ones, McCarthy is at +480. For passing leader among rookies, which is 4th, and that kind of makes sense since he's the 4th QB taken that's going to play. Michael Penix won't be in it. So that kind of makes sense that he's 4th there. It's just following draft order. Again, Caleb Williams -130 to take that. I would not take that at -130. For one, that's just -130 is never that good of odds on anything. But against a field of, Jaden Daniels, who appears to be doing well at camp, and JJ McCarthy, who might throw 40 passes a game by the time he's in, who's to say? Although the fact that Caleb Williams is starting, week 1 and JJ McCarthy probably isn't, probably just tears that. I would not take +480 there. Some interesting special props for the Vikings. JJ McCarthy, 5+ rushing touchdowns is +380. I hate that one, but that's the actual lowest odds of all of the specials that they have on there. For one, we don't know how many games he's going to play, which makes me immediately hate that bet. But also, rushing touchdowns usually is going to rely on like QB sneaks, and that's just like a very specific situations. Like you have to hit a very specific outcome for that to happen, and that outcome has to include JJ McCarthy getting in pretty soon, which based on camp, I don't know if that's as far-fetched as I thought it was maybe if you asked me a month ago, but is still difficult for me to want to lay money on. Maybe one of the bigger ones, Dallas Turner, is the co-favorite with Laiatu Latu to win Defensive Rookie of the Year at +430. It kind of makes sense. The top 3 defenders that came off the board were Latu, Dallas Turner, and Byron Murphy, the second, who went to Seattle as a D tackle. Can't really see a D tackle winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. It's just not a glamorous enough position. So you got kind of 2 edge rushers competing for it at +430 if you believe in that. It sounds like he's all he's cracked up to be at camp. So if you like that, that's +430. A couple of Aaron Jones ones. Over 9.5 touchdowns is +460. He has actually hit that only once in his whole career, and it was 2019, which was, I think, the year where he got the most run, if I recall. That was the year where he got the most exclusive run with the Packers, because I think A.J. Dillon got hurt out of the gate, and he was a rookie that year anyways. Or for some reason, they didn't use A.J. Dillon as much, and that is going to reflect the situation in Minnesota more. So I think that's kind of what they're saying with that. But if you want to just say, he just hasn't really been the goal line back in Green Bay. They've always had somebody else to do that run thumping. You could go with the under there, and over under 725 and a half rushing yards, which is something he has cleared in every season, each of the last 5 seasons, except for last season. Which, I mean, he ended that so hot, but obviously there's always going to be injuries and stuff. So taking anything of this, you're kind of betting on health a little bit. I really like the touchdowns under, just because that's not something that he has done in the past, but I don't know if it's something that I feel super confident in, because part of that reason was that Green Bay handled him differently than the Vikings might handle him. They might give him more run as kind of the true bell cow with maybe not with like 2 drives of Ty Chandler a game. There's some bets for you. Let's move on to the training camp segment of today's episode. There's still practice going on every day, so we'll talk about that next. Today's Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by Gametime, the best place to find last-minute tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater shows, whatever you want. You can find tickets for it on Gametime, and they have all kinds of flash sales right at the top of the app. It's big banners, you can't miss them. That's where you're going to find some pretty insane savings. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for any of these events, and with the Gametime guarantee, if you find the same section or row somewhere else for cheaper, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Just show them, hey, you weren't the best price on the market, and they'll make it so they were the best price in the market. So go get the Gametime app and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Once again, that's the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. The Vikings Secondary has had a rough go of training camp. From, of course, the injuries and tragic loss of Kyrie Jackson, which happened before training camp. So just the pressure that the roster had and the depth chart has endured. But also just on the field, Jordan Addison's cooking them for post routes. Jalen Naylor is like looking like a breakout player. They got to deal with Justin Jefferson every day. We got Johnny Munt screaming at Brian Asamoah after making contested catches. Like the secondary, the coverage has been really, really struggling. Part of this is just the nature of camp, right? Like it will, because you can't quite be as physical as a defense wants to be, it's going to look a little worse than it is, but I still think that it's probably true that you can project a better season for the wide receivers than you can for the defenders, for the cornerbacks. I don't think that I'm on very much of a limb saying that. But part of it too is that Flores' defense is a lot of blitzes. And even if those blitzes get home, you let the quarterback get his rep in, right? You say, I got you for the sack. Okay, make your throw like it's normal. So these coverages are essentially always going to be weaker than they are on the field, where pressure can have a different effect. All of that is caveating something that I think is true even after adjusting for all of that. But on Wednesday, the Vikings secondary kind of got its get back. You had an interception for Josh Metellus. You had an interception for Dwight McGlothern. You had AJ Green had the play of his life. Look up AJ Green on Twitter right now. You will see an absolutely insane press rep on Tristan Jackson. The kind of thing that makes you go, do you want to play football anymore kind of rep. Presses him to absolute hell. Defensive bench is going absolute crazy on this press, and they're right to. And then a one-handed interception to back it all up. So DB's had a great day. And a part of that great day was J.J. McCarthy not having so good of a day. Will Raggett's wrote up a great article. He actually went throw by throw for J.J. McCarthy. You can see, completion to this guy, incompletion to this guy dropped one, this guy dropped one. Not as good of a day for the offense in general. Some of it was J.J. McCarthy, just guys dropping what looked to be good throws, at least according to Will's eye on it. But some of it was, genuinely, well, he missed one there. He threw it high and he threw the interception here and that went bad. And when you have a bad day, what do you do with it? I think that's kind of what I want to talk about, because ultimately it's one data point in the entire big long road of progress that he had a down day. He stacked enough good days in practice for us to not be concerned about that at all, if that's what you're trying to do. But also, for me, I was actually kind of thinking, man, this is going a little bit too easy. And I was wondering if he was challenging his mechanics enough in practice. So here's the concern that I had with J.J. McCarthy going in. And I've been open with this. I'm not just coming up with this now. But the camp concern that I was bringing up was, is he just relying on his comfortable college mechanics too often, right? He would revert to it when pressure came, when it was 11 on 11s or even sometimes in 7 on 7s when the timings have to be real and you're not just throwing on air. He would revert back to his college. He would start rushing and his college mechanics would come back out. Your habits show when the bullets fly. And what I saw in the clips that I could see from this bad day was way less velocity on the ball. And I didn't see the over rotation be quite as bad. And what I'm getting at here is this is what I wanted. I wanted to see a controlled, there was, loftier, touchier passes, working on that. And some of them missed. Yeah, because you're working on that. That's not his skill set, but he's practicing that. That's what I wanted to see him practice. Rather than just doing the zip everything in that he got away with at Michigan, that you won't get away with in a real game situation when a blitz is on you and when, you don't have those factors that are favoring the offense so much. And so while all of the, big long touchdowns are exciting, one, how many of them would have been sacks? Two, do we want to play this on easy mode as much? Or do you want to challenge yourself to do, the mechanics the way coach wants you to do them? And it seemed like this down day was him doing the mechanics the way the coaches wanted him to do them. And the ball was a little slower. I think maybe you backed off the velocity a little too much. But now we're in the process of being able to dial that in. I don't want it to look like this once the games count, right? I want the velocity to be back once the games count, but I want him to get there properly. And dialing the heat back is a necessary step to getting there. Like McCarthy said, and I think he was quoting O'Connell when he said it, the process is the progress. I love that. Everybody made fun of that as like a stupid coach. I think that is a bar and a half. I love that. The process is the progress. Because the point of this is to feel like you are progressing towards something greater than what you were before. And taking one step back to take 2 steps forward is a great way to do that. And if we saw one step back today, but it looks like that step back sets you up for 2 steps forward, I am all for it. And in a weird way, maybe the second worst day that he's had at camp brings me more comfort than all of the good days where he played it like old school, like he used to, and dunked on a 5-man zone secondary because it was a blitz that would have been a sack. That doesn't move me as much. But seeing some lofty passes that I don't think accuracy was as much the issue as timing was, because you're not used to throwing with less velocity, but now you're getting used to throwing with less velocity. So if I see more camp clips from Thursday, if I see a preseason game where the velocity's dialed back a little bit, and maybe some of the throws get there late, maybe some of them get there early, and it's clear that he's just kind of calibrating. That's kind of best case scenario for me, even though it doesn't create the best case preseason stats. Well, we don't care about preseason stats. We're sacrificing preseason stats to make for something way cooler. I am all for that. I think that's part of the learning process. If you are a teacher, or if you're a coach, I know a lot of coaches listen to this, high school coaches listen to the show. Hello, I love you. Welcome. Or in any kind of profession where you have to impart a skill onto someone, not just impart information like a salesperson goes over their brochure, but like if you have to impart a skill onto someone, if you have to train anyone, there's a lot of military people, a lot of veterans, thank you for your service. If you've had to maybe train anybody, whatever that is, if you've had to teach somebody, the patience that is required there is very clear. And I think those who aren't patient with this have never had to teach anybody anything, and don't understand that, Rome wasn't built in a day, and that the signs of progress will not always be linear. It's a really important thing to understand. And I think this is, if we see it really cause a more controlled J.J. McCarthy in the future, rather than the kind of J.J. McCarthy that tries to write checks that are hard to cash and throws passes like that TCU pick 6 from the playoff game a couple years ago, I'm big into it. But we're going to keep kind of following the detailed step-by-step day-to-day of J.J. McCarthy's camp. But soon we're only talking one more time before the Vikings play a preseason game in Las Vegas. So soon we'll have some actual tape to talk about, and these things will be a little bit more concrete. I cannot wait for that. Oh my God, I need some tape to break down that isn't, iPhone clips from the stands or whatever weird cutoff thing the Vikings post. Give me something real to look at. I'm excited. Hope you're excited too. I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.